I want you to think. Think hard. Think back to last week. Think about the number of network outages you suffered in those previous 5 workdays. I want you to think first about the number of unexpected emails you received last week from your firm's system administrators. How many servers in your firm went down last week for unscheduled maintenance? 1 server? 2? 5? How many emails last week warned a network application needed an emergency database repair? 1 email? 2 emails? 5? Now I want you to think about the productivity you wasted last week by reading emails from administrators who told you about outages that meant nothing to you. How many emails wailed about a server or application you'd never heard of? 1 email? 2? 5? Now I want you to think about the number of times you rebooted your PC last week because of a software conflict or a network anomaly, or just because your firm's help desk told you to give the reboot a try. How many times did you push the reset button last week, huh? 1 push? 2? 5? Now I want you to think about the number of coworkers in your firm who reformatted their hard disks last week just because the help desk told them to do it. How many man-months or man-years of work and data did your firm lose as a result of this helpful advice? 1 man-month? 2 man-years? 5? Now I want you to think about the productivity you wasted last week trying to come up with someone's new email address. Not their old email address, their new email address. How many of your colleagues changed their email addresses because they got married or got divorced or changed ISPs last week, or just because the company itself changed its name for marketing reasons and for no other reason you've got to go out and get their email address, huh? How many? Page 2. Okay, now I want you to compare normal, everyday events, like the ones we just talked about, to the life or death damage that occurred when the slammer worm destroyed whole portions of the internet in the wee hours of a Saturday morning in January. You do recall this devastating worm, don't you? Don't you? Okay, let's sidetrack for a moment for those few listeners out there who don't know slammer from a hole in the firewall. Fearmongers at both MI2G and Computer Economics estimate this worm caused up to $1.2 billion in damages worldwide. Many non-business internet users can recall firsthand how Slammer kicked South Korea off the internet for a day, how it nearly killed people in Seattle, how it disrupted many thousands of ATMs in the wee hours of a Saturday morning. Anchor IS CIO Tim Mullen described how someone could have died as a direct result of the slammer worm. IT ISAC Director Peter Aller claimed the slammer worm crippled commercial and military air traffic. A true first for an internet worm. Airplanes couldn't fly, Aller insisted. It goes almost without saying that Chicago and Rhode Island nightclub patrons need unfettered access to bank funds in the wee hours of a Saturday morning. They can't live without an ATM card, and Slammer made partying an intolerable experience. But enough about Slammer. Time now for some other comparisons. Page 3. I want you to compare Slammer's toll versus the monetary damage and the potential loss of life that occurred when BlackBerry devices stopped working in the United States for a day on Valentine's Day. We know monetary damage occurred for a fact because we know Wall Street relies on BlackBerry devices to conduct its business. We know potential loss of life occurred for a fact because we know doctors and policemen and paramedics and even military generals rely on BlackBerry devices to perform their duties. How many of these people couldn't make money or save lives or kill Iraqi soldiers for nearly a full day as a direct result of the BlackBerry outage compared to the slammer worm? Now I want you to compare the number of commercial and military air flights canceled by... Hang on a second here. What did he say? Aller said airplanes couldn't fly, and yet I can't find a single shred of evidence to support the fact that airplanes couldn't fly because... No, I'm okay. I'm cool with this. We'll take Aller at face value. We'll assume that airplanes didn't fly. 3, 2, 1. Now I want you to compare the number of commercial and military air flights canceled by Slammer versus the number of commercial and military air flights canceled by bad winter weather in February and March and April. Did an internet worm prove itself more catastrophic to the U.S. airline industry than Mother Nature did? Now I want you to compare Slammer-borne ATM outages versus Blizzard-borne ATM outages in February and March and even April. How many cash boxes were rendered inaccessible for days by snowstorms compared to those cash boxes rendered useless for hours by the Slammer worm? Now I want you to compare Slammer-borne ATM outages versus out-of-cash ATM outages. How many ATMs were rendered useless by people who withdrew extra cash to cope with a predicted blizzard versus those very same out-of-cash ATMs rendered useless for hours by the Slammer worm, huh? Page 4. Now I want you to compare the money spent in Washington, D.C. when the Slammer worm struck versus the money spent in Washington, D.C. when federal workers got paid to stay home for a snow day in February after getting paid to stay home for a federal holiday. That would be President's Day, a holiday no longer expected for corporate employees, I might add. How much extra debt did the U.S. pile up as a result of a blizzard that conveniently fell right after a long weekend compared to the Slammer worm? Now I want you to compare recent government-implored antivirus purchases versus the recent government-implored duct tape purchases. Think about the Americans who bought sticky gray canvas laminate to protect against chemical and/or biological threats. How many rolls did they buy on average per child? 1 duct tape roll per kid? 2? 5? Why didn't they throw some of their hard-earned money at antivirus software to protect against worms like... wait a minute. Antivirus software doesn't protect PCs from the onslaught of worms like Slammer. Ignore my last statement. It doesn't follow the crux of my column. Now I want you to make the most important comparison of all. Compare a 911 operator who uses a pencil for a few hours to keep track of cops and firemen versus a 911 operator who can't find a way to work because a blizzard sealed off all the routes to the command center. Clearly, we must dismantle both the internet and Mother Nature for national security reasons. Lives depend on it, don't you think? I'm Rob Rosenberger for vMyths. That's VMYTHS.com. Truth about computer virus hysteria. Be there or be scared.